Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, some more interesting developments. So much is happening right now, it's hard to cover everything, but I will, and look for my upcoming dinner with Dr. Thor, where I'll talk about so many other things that's happening right now that's very important for everybody to know. Of course, there's many things that can be done and many things to handle all situations. But interesting that came up to... that was left on my YouTube channel here, where someone listened to my Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, the head of the Temple of Set and the founder of the Temple of Set, had died. Well, apparently he had died September of last year. Now, I don't know if he's one of the many fatalities linked to this COVID or not. It's very hard to find out what he died of, etc., and certainly wasn't very publicized. There's very little written about him on the web that I can find, and quite frankly, who cares? I'm not going to spend hours looking for this. If somebody can get me details of how old he was and what he died of, please report that to me. Leave it in the comments, and I'll make a second lecture here. Now, I've done stuff on this guy and came into contact with the Temple of Set and Satanists when I started my first sojourn into alternative religions and getting involved particularly with pagan groups of Nordic pagans, where I first started to hear about Michael Aquino and, of course, ran into Edred Flowers, other known as Edred Thorson, that Satanist Texan who runs a Nazi magic group. And, of course, part of this was the big Nazi himself, left-handed path goofball Michael Aquino, who did rituals in Himmler's castle and other things, tapping into that wonderful murderous scumbucket who tortured millions of his own people and murdered so many others in the name of Allah, by the way. So the whole idea is that that's who these people are. And they're so delusional, as I've covered in so many things, to think that Nazis are white people and etc. when they're Arabs. But, you know, the education continues. But apparently he died, and of course he's a fairly confused guy in general, but I'm not sure how old he was. But he certainly didn't die young, but he didn't die really old. He probably was in his late 70s or 80s. You got to remember that average life expectancy right now is about 78. So that's what the average person lives to. Most people who have any kind of decent medical care and live in the West are living into 86 to 90 without a problem. Some even more than that, but most people are pretty disabled. Now, it's interesting, his entire story, and he was, I listened to information about him on a late-night talk show in Los Angeles for many years, hosted by, this was... public radio by a guy named Tuckman. I can't remember his name. Who may still be on the air. I don't know. I just saw a blurb on him a few days ago. I'm not sure what that was about. But he used to do this late night show from midnight to like 5 in the morning, and I used to pick this up and listen to it. And he covered the Temple of Set and etc. of what this guy was involved in, which it was pretty public and kind of shocking. And so many issues are brought up with this that I don't want to get too much into other issues. But, you know, it's so typical that these kind of goofballs, these failures, these losers, these people get involved in the military, are given high rank and high clearances. Well, as we see what's going on in Afghanistan, the competency or the incompetency of the American military is just so obvious that it's hard to believe anybody can support these loser buffoons. So the whole idea is Michael Aquino, of course, was a big member and, of course, was stationed in San Francisco, the hotbed of Satanism in the 60s, which was started by or publicized by Anton LaVey, who started the Church of Satan. Kind of a drug, party, sex, let's do our own thing, typical 60s type stuff there. Was more seeing it as an archetype than as a religion. So when we get involved in that, we have to understand that whole history, but I don't want to go to it. But that's where he started out. Eventually, they, like every organization, which are intentionally disrupted, and he took over. And he wrote a whole book about LaVey and the Church of Satan, which is pretty fascinating. I've read it. And he's accused him from Anton LaVey of just about everything possible you can think about, including personal bad hygiene. So, and had nothing good to say about him or not, but this influential rich guy who nobody really liked in the Church of Satan at the time was given all the jobs that nobody wanted, just like he was successful in the military for the same reason. He was a studious guy. He passed lots of tests. He could write. Of course, he wrote the actual Church of Satan newsletter, which, of course, nobody wants to do, and this is a problem in all organizations. Getting out newsletters was critical, but who wants to do that every month? And you think it would be easy, but it's not. So they slapped him with that job. He didn't help or participate in any way. And when Anton LaVey finally got sick of all the nonsense without any of the monetary gain and wanted to bring people in and expand the church, the first person to scream that we should be in a military fashion, you got to earn everything. So, and of course, being a test taker rich kid that he was, mommy left him millions from real estate dealings, he didn't like any of that stuff. And he really didn't have the ear of Anton LaVey, and I'm not sure very many people paid attention to him or not. The Temple of Set and the break-off organizations were not started by him initially. He eventually took them over for the same reasons I just gave you. Nobody else really wanted to do the stupid work. But of course, stupid guy did. Well, he had nothing else to do. He was on the government payroll. They sit around and do nothing in the military most of the time, just as most government officials do. So he had lots of time to play and do his little stuff and run around with his Satanism. Apparently had a whole bunch of fellow officers in the Presidio, the San Francisco Army military base, as his buddies and pals. And this was personally accepted by the military. Military, who you would think are hillbilly Christians praising Jesus, is loaded with pagans and Satanists to the umpteenth degree. I was always amazed in my original occult organization that I started in the 80s and 90s of how many military people joined that, particularly in the occult aspects. They were not, at least the ones I didn't ran into, they were not Satanists, but it's interesting that military people would be interested in alternative belief systems. So that certainly is very interesting. So to give you a history of him just really quickly, well, he's a lieutenant colonel and of psychological operations with the Special Forces. He was a Special Forces officer, so he claims, or at least he got his Special Forces badge. He graduated from Industrial College of Armed Forces, the National Defense University, the Defense Intelligence College, and the list goes on here. Foreign Service Institute, Department of State, U.S. Army Special Forces Center, Psychological Civil Affairs, Foreign Officer, U.S. Army Command and General Staff College, U.S. Army Intelligence School, and U.S. Army Space Institute. I mean, you can see that this guy has went through all the training programs. And this is what particularly the Army loves. Now, the Army has been notoriously, and the military in general, is really a bunch of uneducated idiots. Only the Air Force had some sort of college people in there, so-called educated. If you can give a military person credit for that. Certainly Air Force really has done nothing. But the military, in particular in the Army, has always been known to have dumb people in it. You only join the military because you're not too smart. So the whole idea is that when you're able to go through all these schools, pass it easily, which he was, and this is what made him special. I mean, I've listened to hours of him talk, and he comes off as kind of a wimpy little studious guy to me. But the point is, if you can pass all these courses, which was pushed upon, particularly in the 70s and 80s when he was very active, you are a star military man, and they're going to open all the doors for you. Because very few people had education and very few people went to these schools to any great degree. So he was really Mr. Schoolboy. And he has a list of decorations. Most of these, from what I can see, the decorations are typically what you get. He did serve in Vietnam. Bronze Star, Meritorious Service medal, air medal, Army commendations, parachutist badge. But you got to remember he was an officer there, and you get your badges in the military, and they do it deliberately. They'll take you out to give you your parachutist badge. They'll take you out someplace safe, and you jump out of the plane, and you've done that, so you get your badge. Missile badge and the Republic of Vietnam Gallantry Cross. Gallantry? For losers, psychological warfare medal, first class, whatever that means, air service medal. So all of these things he got, and I'm sure he was a good soldier. But that's like saying non-smelly poo. So the whole idea is that as we get into all that, and he's a very prolific writer. If you go on Amazon, you'll find lots of his books he's written in the last few years. Last 5 years or so, when he was fully retired, he's been writing like crazy. So the whole idea is he graduated from the University of California at Santa Barbara. Interesting, the same school I went to. And at similar times, but I never heard about that. I wasn't really at that time involved in much of that. But what's even interesting is here's this guy with very questionable morals and everything else. Of course, he claims everything he does is wonderful. He's been linked to, directly or indirectly, to all sorts of child molestations on military bases, which seem to have been pandemic in the 90s, the 80s, the late 80s and 90s, and he seemed to have been in most of these places. We really don't know. I did read from a Jenny Scott, who did a book on him, and of course he's written his own version of that actual children identified his secret entrance to his house because he didn't go in the front door because he was afraid of people attacking him. So with all his money, he had a house a few doors down from his main house, and it was a secret way of getting in there. Now, supposedly, per this person, this child identified entering there. So he was taken for rituals and abused there, supposedly. We don't know exactly. Certainly, this is typical, and there's all sorts of stuff that has been linked to him. And, of course, the cowardice and incompetent military command, and particularly the ministers and so forth that were non-Satanist, attack him without any verification of a lot of these charges. And he was discharged finally, or his contract wasn't renewed, with the Army stating that while we have significant evidence of his involvement in these things, we choose not to enforce these and have just canceled his contract. So they didn't want to make a stink there, particularly in a place that had all these children, everything else going there, and a high-ranking officer. Lieutenant Colonel, General's next. Gee, General Aquino, that sounds really good. So the whole idea, he could stand next to Patton as the most corrupt and disgusting losers. So the whole idea is that we get into all these things that we need to fully understand. But it's interesting that he was the national commander of the Eagle Scouts Honor Society and recipient of its Knight Eagle Distinguished Service Award. So here's a guy who's been doing the badges and all this stuff, and this is the kind of guy he is, and this is why he's done so well. The Virginal Honor of the Order of the Arrow and the Distinguished Service Key of the Alpha Phi Omega fraternity that he was a member of in Santa Barbara University. So all of this is exactly, you can see the type of person this is, and people who can go to colleges and complete all these things. And this is how society has the wool pulled over their eyes by so many people. We do this with scientists of today. Well, they have all this accreditation, they kind of know what they're talking about, right? Well, how can you argue with that? Well, it's pretty much the opposite. But this is very typical of a unimaginative, single-minded, go to schooly and learn things, because he didn't really have any intellectual capacities. And when you read his writings, it's 50 pages of, I quote this, I reference this, to kind of say that he is smart because he read a lot of bookies. Well, it's not the reading that matters, it's ultimately the interpretation. And when people start quoting other people's and their books, other than mentioning this as a idea stimulator, well, they're just mimics. They don't know anything. You know, science does this today. They keep talking about Newton 400 years ago, or even Einstein over 100 years ago. Well, Nothing's happened in between? You're going to mimic that? Well, if you want to use that for inspiration, that's fine. But let's get clear here. You know nothing new. You're just parroting what is written by some other idiot. So, so this is where he came from. So it's a very interesting kind of character, not what you would think. You know, everybody thinks that these kind of people involved in these things are kind of weird people that drool all the time and are hanging out at schoolyards looking to molest people. It just isn't true. And they tend to look at things in a comic book fashion. The Temple of Set in particular was the cream of the crop of Satanists, the pseudo-intellectuals that they are, the poor researchers and perverted individuals that all of these people really are very dangerous because most of them are in fairly professional positions and influential. And we go through a lot of them. But of course, when you really get to know these people, you find out that there's all sorts of problems. Their Nazi worship, their sadomasochistic sexual practices, and all the other things that they're involved in. And certainly there's a lot of evidence to point to the fact that Michael Aquino and a lot of the people involved in the Temple of Set allegedly were involved in all sorts of perverse acts, including child molestation. Now, these are alleged, and of course, there isn't any proof of this per se. But what is there proof of in life? I don't know with it exactly, but we certainly have lots of different evidence pointing towards that. And people that want to get his side of it, he has written an entire book on how he was witch hunted there. And rightfully so. I mean, here's a guy that was given the highest possible security clearances while being the head of the Temple of Set and being under investigation for child molestation. He was in NORAD. He talks about his experiences there and what was seen in space and everything else. And the usual stuff you get from him is that, first of all, he can't say nothing because of security. That's always the cop-out, but disregards that. I mean, it's really hard to give these people credit on any level whatsoever. He came out with an entire paper stating how psychic powers and everything else were just a joke and that there was no proof of any of it. And all of this remote viewing and everything else had no verification whatsoever. So he wrote an entire paper on this, only giving NLP a little bit of credit. He read all the Russian documents and was paid to do this, being close to the Echelon Institute, which is in Northern California, close to San Francisco. Apparently, you know, on our dime, of course, he went there and read all the translations of the numerous releases from Russian papers that were given out in the late 70s, 80s. I'm not sure what the time frame was. And nor do I want to get into details because you always got some boobas dumbhead. Well, it wasn't 1984, it was 1985. Well, who cares? We're talking about the core of things here. So, as people get involved in all that stuff, so it's very interesting. So after reading all that, getting that information, but you got to remember the twisted mind. If there is a technique or something powerful, etc., well, he's going to keep it for himself and for the rest of his group. Now, the whole Temple of Set was a very close organization. You really couldn't get in there and do much. I mean, they have outwardly lodges and everything else around the world, and you got to remember the membership in these lodges are minuscule. At one time in Britain, one of the hotbeds of Satanism and Temple of Set, well, they only claimed publicly to have 70 members in a country that has 60 million people in it. So certainly there isn't a lot of members, and this is very typical of countries. While they will have a grotto in a particular country, they have 5 or 6 people there, and, you know, like all groups in this world, even if it's a toy group, there just isn't very many people who are active. So they can't even count that on their own. So he was a very prolific writer, as I said. You can find all of his stuff on Amazon. In Kindle forms and so forth, if you're interested in reading his writings and so forth. But as I said, I found all of his writings kind of childish, imbecilic, and pseudo-intellectual. You know, quoting everybody, yes, but Shakespeare said... You know, this is the kind of boring stuff I just went through. But in 2006, he retired... Well, I thought it was before that. I didn't know he waited to retire from the government, 2006. I don't know. He was recognized by Scotland's Lord Lyon, King of Arms, as the 13th Baron of Rachane, Argyll. He is a member of the Clan Campbell. How nice, Scots, that you have a head Satanist there as part of your recognized family. Of course, he bought land there and he paid them for it. That's what he did. I don't know, he's an Italian. I don't know if he has any Scottish heritage or not. Who knows? Everybody's kind of a mutt when it comes to their heritage, that someone in their family. So I don't know if someone in his family was Scottish or not, but apparently, well, of course, it's not too difficult with the Scots, who spent all their time murdering the Irish, for the Brits, that they would take money to do this. So it's sad. I don't want to label everybody. There's good people everywhere. But unfortunately, that's the history of so much of it. And, of course, the Scots turned on their own people and recently voted down independence to stay under the British boot. Since 1975, he's been a priest of the ancient Egyptian Order of the God Set and served as the high priest of the International Temple of Set until 1996. And, of course, he's always connected with it. He ran that organization for many years, and as I said, it's very close. They required you to do things in the Temple of Set that was magically impossible, so they could keep a group of selected people at the top. So you could never get at the top, and whoever took over the organization was hand-chosen. But, you know, that's expectable, and that's just business. So, his magical abilities and everything else are really unknown. I mean, he readily admits that the entire system of the Temple of Set is completely invented, and that we don't even know who Set was. Of course, Set is evil in most categories. Some people like to whitewash that, but generally Set was the god of disease and illness, etc., and killed his brother. So, but the bottom line is that there is no system of this out there to follow that comes from any ancient traditions, as there is with nothing, particularly when it gets into the magical reality. There is no systems out there that have been carried on. There certainly are some systems that date back or who have been kept up well. These are not from the Middle East. Generally, they come from Caribbean countries, and these traditions have been kept for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and they have kind of this chain of empowered spirits they use, local spirits, etc., as well as your classical gods, but all very kept very secret to a priesthood that doesn't allow anybody to go outside of it. So, and this is true with everything. So, if you're in a top organization, company, etc., well, you just don't let anybody in. They're hand-picked, and it becomes very incestuous as things go on. So, keeping that in mind, that's his particular history. The fact the Temple of Set today, of course, is still operating. I don't know what they're doing. They've had a few books written in the past, which are, I've read a lot of their books, and they're virtually comical in their imbecilic nature, and they're looking at this as kind of a joke. The problem is that I don't believe that's their real technology, and I don't believe that's their real thoughts. What they give to the public is what they want the public to believe. They're not fools. They're not going to come out with strong dictums and statements that put their head on the chopping block or put them in front of the public eye negatively. So what they write and what everything else really can't be believed. What they do in their privacy and everything else, and of course, coming from a sex, drugs, and rock and roll Church of Satan, this must have been a great interest of theirs. And of course, that's why Satanism was popular, is because that's what it connected. Altars of naked girls. Well, you can't get a actual group of people to show up for that? Well, you're stupid if you think you can't. And of course, this is the 60s and everything else. Free-throwing drugs. There were a lot of criminals involved in the Church of Satan. Of course, the Church of Satan imploded because of lack of support and money, as it always happens with these groups. So, and most groups for that matter. There just isn't support. Disruptors are sent in to crush the organizations. And Anton LaVey, while having the best-selling occult book of all time, the Satanic Bible that sold millions, never made anything off of that. You're talking about paperback books that sold at that time for $2. What did he get from it? A quarter a book? He stated in his divorce papers, who his wife crushed him and took everything he owned, power, that he was making $20,000 a year in the late 1970s. So certainly not a lot of money. Even back then, people were making, that had real incomes, were making $30,000, $40,000 even then. So $20,000 is absolutely nothing and would be considered an average or a little above average salary at those times. So the whole idea is that certainly that's not a show of power, and it really never went anywhere. His books after the Satanic Bible didn't sell all that much. He had daughters that wrote books. None of this really got kicked off. And while he got a few TV and movie roles because being the bad guy and had a following because it was sex and drugs, you can always get a following with sex and drugs. Even Charles Manson got a following. Had lots of babes. It's all about sex and drugs. So it's not too difficult. So the whole idea is that, so he broke away from that being more of this conservative type that we think is conservative. Of course, how much he got involved in these kind of activities, we don't know. The Church of Satan had congressmen, and of course, Sammy Davis Jr. was a member, and so was a few other actresses. I forget her. James Manfield, I guess, was one of the famous ones. But again, this was the 60s. People did that. And there was a certain benefit to it. And we're going to talk about Sammy Davis Jr. in another lecture. But the whole idea is that this is his basic history. From them, it's kind of a mired stuff. He's got his little organization. He's basically didn't make any money outside of being an officer in the military, getting his retirement, getting a big fat paycheck. You know, the military is paid very well, particularly officers, and they have huge amounts of benefits and luxuries that they live in, particularly when they're outside the United States. Now, the average poor GI or soldier or airman isn't getting all that much, but, you know, their lifestyles aren't really that bad, particularly if they're out of the country where they have huge facilities, tax-free everything, and live high on the hog. So, we have to understand that. So the whole idea is he never made anything. Secondly, his mother was involved in the real estate boom of California, particularly Northern California, where real estate prices are very high even to this day. So, it's been estimated that he was left anywhere from $5 to $10 million, and this was in the 80s, 90s, somewhere in that area, which back then was quite a bit of money. And so I don't know how that all adds up, and I don't know if he's left very expensive San Francisco real estate and all that stuff. Who knows how much is actually there. So, and of course, he had his officer salary, which has always been good with all the benefits I just stated. Has he done anything past that? Well, not really. He hasn't done any businesses or manifested anything past that. He did go up the military ranks and became a lieutenant colonel, one step below a general, because of his educational background. And obviously he was ass-kissing enough and did all the right things to get these particular ranks. But, you know, if you're educated and you have a college degree, well, you're pretty much guaranteed to be an officer. And if you do what he does, you're pretty much guaranteed to become a lieutenant colonel. So it's unless you're just a total screw-up. But it's pretty hard to go to all those military schools and not become a lieutenant colonel. So that's the way it goes in the military, and as I've mentioned, the military is always seen as ignorant boobs, so anytime they could promote somebody who was educated or completed war colleges, that this was part of the game. So what is his accomplishments? As I said, you can read all of his books, and, you know, this is a pretty warped mind. As I said, I've listened to him. He comes off like old granddaddy and likes to talk about so many things. But when it really comes down to it, what has he done? I mean, first of all, he didn't start an organization. He took a lot of people from the Church of Satan, which is real typical. Here's this guy, Anton LaVey, starts everything, and then people don't agree with him, and they desert the boat. Now, he wasn't able to keep anything going. He had his own money. He had a structure to take care of him, meaning, you know, he had a day job, baby. You know, the government is paying your check. You're living high on the hog in the Presidio in San Francisco, and you have a lot of time to goof off. Go on and read Russian papers, which you think are all nonsense, or so you say, and psychic power is all garbage. I mean, this is the metaphysical, magical person. He claims he had ultimate possibilities, and on battlefields he would put spirits there, and the enemy would run. You mean the military ran in Vietnam? What are the victories there? So the whole idea is that I don't know what he did with that or anything else he did. So, and apparently he did all sorts of, and it's hard to get information on this. People claim that he was out in the jungles doing witchcrafty type stuff and it scared everybody. I don't know. It's hard to find out. I am going to read all the stuff. It's kind of fascinating. But he goes into the whole satanic scam, as he calls it, in the Presidio, in his book, which you can get on Kindle. He's got some goofball novels. Fire Force, a Star Wars parody, which goes into some advanced technology, the neutron bomb, Pegasus and pin feathers. 1986, when going through his late mother, Betty Ford paper in his basement, her son, Michael Aquino, discovered. So, I don't know, some more stuff there. I'm not sure what that's all about. But he's got all this. He's got some psychic warfare stuff, and I've always find his books kind of strange. Mind Wars. He's talked about of how to use psychological warfare and certain things. And he's got this huge volume on the Church of Satan where he goes through it. And of course, being the studious, badge-keeping, military, brown-noser, high-graded college student, he kept these massive amounts of detailed papers that he refers to. All the letters he ever had, all the information. He writes this all down in his book. It is kind of an interesting history, although very slanted, of the Church of Satan. So it does give you information. He talks about a lot of the going on. Of course, it's all been filtered through him. He's not going to admit to doing anything strange or anything else. There's other people like Jenny Scott who came out and had an affair with him, who talks about what he really was like. So it is an interesting book if you're really interested in the Church of Satan. And what was going on there from his point of view. And of course, he was not a supporter, he was a user. So there's all sorts of his bizarre little freaky minds from this Italian-Scottish lord and old. So the whole idea is that these are something that people should look at and read to get further information. But again, it's through his warped mind. You can't really believe this. As I said, I've listened to him on many, many talk shows, and he really doesn't talk about anything of great value. They will not share any of their personal techniques. I've gotten many books from the Temple of Saturn, from the runic organization run by Edred Flowers, and they don't say anything. They're so kindergarten it isn't even funny. I mean, Edred Flowers is a big-time satanic S&M practitioner, and he has a little book on that. It's written like it's for a 10-year-old. There is no kind of explicit talk, explicit anything in it, and they really don't share anything of creating magical states through using a sadomasochistic sex. I mean, there isn't even virtually a hint to it. So it's like a bad grade school talking about it. So they're very careful what they do, what they write, and what they give out. I've come to the conclusion, because it's so vacuous, all their information is so vacuous that they know nothing. And I don't think they have any power whatsoever. I don't think being a lieutenant colonel with a big salary and all this free time to go into your personal fetishes is a person who has power. I don't think that mommy leaving you $10 million is a sign of empowerment. All of this adds up to no empowerment. There really hasn't been any great evolutions from the people involved. Edred Flowers is a junior college teacher in Austin, Texas, the last time I heard. He has pushed his books into major publishers because he's a Satanist now. People like Bear Books, who are publishing Nazi Satanist literature now, and I think it's Schreiber or whatever, the CBS Publishing, who's publishing his books. Well, these are old books written 30 years ago, and they're probably never going to sell. The fact is that he makes a few bucks there, that he privately published these. I mean, certainly is not a captain of industry. He certainly hasn't made any money himself personally. He's milked the, quote, Odinist movement, tricking them to think that Odin, who he considers Satan, was able to sell to those people, and this is what he studied through his contacts of studying in Germany, being part of the actual Mark de Sade Society, and hooking up with all the black magic practitioners in Germany. So the whole idea is that that's his background, which has absolutely nothing to do. Of course, the runes are not in any way Germanic whatsoever. They tend to be Norse and Atlantean. They have absolutely nothing to do with the debased German practices, who are Arabs. So the whole idea is that we need to understand the fact of what's going on. So what is his brain achievement? I don't know what Don Webb, who took over, did. So none of these people seem to have been very successful. Now, what they're doing, how they're even surviving, I don't know. We do know how Aquino survived on a big government paycheck. And it's amazing how many of these people have big government paychecks. But big government paychecks is not personal success. I mean, he's following his way that he did in the Boy Scouts of just being in line with everybody else, doing his practices. He was able to learn and read well and regurgitate information to pass tests. Now, this isn't any stroke of genius. There are billions of people that do this every day. So what have they done? So certainly Edred, who, by the way, Edred Flowers, otherwise known as Edred Thorson, ironically, as a little side note, well, his first book was published by his father-in-law. Now, here's this guy who is a Nazi. And his father-in-law, who was Samuel Weiser, he married his daughter, is a Jew. You figure that out, but that's why Jews have always been kind of criticized, and I certainly agree with that. I just don't understand this kind of thing of do anything for the buck, apparently. Not that anybody else is much better, and I'm always a big supporter of Israel and the Jewish people, who I consider myself part of. So the whole idea is that as we understand all that, we need to... that's his great achievement. Now, he's never done anything that him as a city college professor put out horrendously produced little booklets and everything else at high prices. I mean, they were really very poorly done. You would think that back then, and this was the 90s, etc., that he could have produced some decent stuff. None of it was. So it was imbecilically childlike, done with, to save money and at fairly high prices for the junk it was. And there generally was nothing in there. So the whole idea is that nothing being in there of any value is what you can get from this. So, and it's the same thing with the Temple of Set and everything else. I mean, what have they actually done? And they haven't been a big hit. The fact that a bunch of people want sex and drugs, and you set up a couple of grottos around the world, and you have a total membership of maybe worldwide 400 or 500 if you're lucky. I frankly doubt those are active. You're probably talking about worldwide now. It's about 300 active members. They've done nothing. And they certainly haven't gotten out there. They haven't published other books. Well, he's going to sit on his butt in Scotland, thinking he's a lord of the manor because he went over there and bought a big piece of property, which guaranteed him lordship. So these are the type of things. So what is all this? What we can look back at his life. Is there anything interesting, different? Has he achieved much? Has he done anything new? I mean, the problem with all these Satanists is that one quality of Satanists, or actually two. First of all, none of them can heal at all, which is one of the most important things you need in life. You got to heal. The second thing is they never have a new idea. So he didn't come up with any new concept. He went back 7,000 or 10,000 years to the Egyptians and took that, which he has no connection to whatsoever. So he isn't Middle Eastern. I'm not. He claims apparently Scottish and Italian. So I don't know what he thinks he's getting out of that. He certainly didn't claim higher societies that were more based in other philosophies, the Greeks, the Romans, etc. He went back to the ancient Egyptians and invented everything. There's nothing we have from ancient Egypt that is complete. There's a bunch of fractions. They just came up with a new papyrus that showed the fact that there were Christians that were actually practicing human sacrifice. And they found out that all of this stuff is just a joke. There's nothing complete in any system whatsoever, particularly anything hooked up to the devastated societies of the Middle East. And, of course, Europe is a total bunghole, because everybody was killed. The Romans killed every single druid they could find and annihilated them in general. So it came to the fact that there is nothing there whatsoever. So people have tried to reconstruct all this stuff, and what does it mean? Well, I'm not sure there was any traditions that have any great value. Certainly all of these societies, including the Egyptians and their powerful magicians, were conquered by other people. So the Romans conquered them. The Greeks held Egypt for 700 years. After them came the Romans. So, all of these people conquered Egypt. And certainly their head magical people were unable to stop this or even kill some notable people. This is a historical fact. So the whole idea is that what did he achieve? Well, he's written all these kind of goofy books. The Satanic Bible 50th Anniversary Revision. I wonder how he's revived that book that you can now get. And you can buy it on Kindle for $6.66. So, his Mind War books are kind of interesting, but he doesn't seem to get it. And he ultimately says that we have physical means to torture people. We don't need to use mind control. He doesn't believe in anything psychic, as I went over. So all of this is quite interesting of going into it. But, when you read even his fiction, his semi-occult stuff, it's pretty poor stuff. I mean, it's not very interesting. And certainly none of these has any kind of practical information in it. Now, there are certain, quote, practical practices within the Temple of Set, but these books are more difficult to get. But none of it's really very profound. And nobody in the Temple of Set has demonstrated any kind of serious power. Certainly, Aquino himself didn't live that long. He probably, and we're still hunting for this, lived to be his mid-80s, which is pretty common. The bottom line is that what happened with that? Where is the Temple of Set? What has he established? Well, it's really nothing. And so he hasn't really left anything. He was able to survive well and for long periods of time because he was on the government payroll. Now, I've said that several times, and I think that's important. What I like to see is occultists who have made it on their own, who have generated their own money, who have been able to reach levels of empowerment, investments, or other things that they've used some sort of metaphysical power to achieve. This hasn't seemed to be the case with him. I mean, you can't say that you do well when mommy leaves you $10 million and you have a big fat retirement check from the U.S. military. So, what did they achieve? What have they done? Well, I don't think Michael Aquino will be remembered any more than any other of these screwball occultists. He certainly hasn't left any quintessential texts. Certainly, this made-up, which he states himself, this completely made-up and contrived religion of Set is nothing more than another egotistical boost to his under-reality that he lives in. The problem is that in this day and age, which we've converted over to Satanism en masse, and it is considered okay in public society, this has not been caused because Satanism or Temple of Set belief systems are so great. It's just that when you measure them up against the failed, debased, horrible Christianity in particular, because, first of all, if you're a Satanist, you're a reverse Christian. So you're not an anti-Christian. You're based in the God forms of the Christians. So basically that's what you are, and basically that he is. He's a reverse Christian because you're buying into that kind of childish mentality. But when you hold up a society that values all the values of Satanism, which is sex, power, drugs, all the things, just the most basic emotions, just as our diets are, salt, fat, and sugar. Well, these are just things that your brain just loves because they're so offensively crude. When you hold those up to it, you look at the Satanists who you think are honest with you, and you say, yeah, well, the church is doing the same thing they're doing. At least the Satanists are honest. That's what it comes down to. And the failure, where Christianity has completely failed, with over a third, 33.3% of Christians have left the church already. And this will continue. Christianity will shrink in the next 50 to 100 years as the massive onslaught of Islam comes in, where people see value in. They have very clear-cut lines. They help each other. And there isn't very many scandals in Islam, per se, because they kill everybody. So you're not going to come out and hear that a caliph is a child molester, because they will kill you. So the whole idea is that with that and the horrible climate created by the Catholic Church, which is taking males and keeping them non-sexual, which is impossible, has created nothing but problems. So when we get into all this, we have, and you look at what's out there, you have Buddhism, which is a failure in general. Buddhism's been around, one of the oldest religions, probably 4,000 or 5,000 years. We don't know. Like everything, we don't know. We should just write that on a t-shirt. I don't know. So the whole idea is that certainly has been in its many, many variants all over Asia and so forth, and it really has achieved nothing. So when we move into Judaism, I don't even know why people talk about Judaism. There's only 17 million Jews, so it's said, and I still can't believe that number. But even if it's double, triple that, there's hardly any Jews. Now, they seem to be very influential because of their genius in business and in general, that they are influential in pretty much every phase of our society. Yet there are very, very few of them. So what it comes up to is we're the massive population. And by the way, most Muslims are not in the Middle East. They're in Asia, which is growing leaps and bounds. And the number one religion around the world within 50 years will be Islam, as India will turn into the largest Islamic state. China is catching up. And of course, there is huge amounts of growth everywhere in the world because of the simplistic sexual domination that Islam offers to all of its followers. So there's clear-cut rules there, and these are taken care of, and there seems to be some sort of structures within structures that they help each other, where you're certainly not going to get that from the Catholic Church or any other Christian church, which seem to be impotent nut jobs, thinking that dinosaurs were here 8,000 years ago. So the whole idea is that it's not too hard when you go against that kind of a philosophy that you can easily discredit it. And while people will look at, hey, they're into sex, money, and power, well, isn't that what we see? If now that's what the Kardashians are all about. And we have these giant-butted women that have no skills whatsoever but are worshipped. And what is that? It's all about money. It's really sad. I saw the Kardashians go down to Skid Row in Los Angeles, and they claimed it never, we didn't know this. And of course, even after that, they went back to their, $200 lunches and ignored the situation entirely. So the whole idea is that, so when you start putting those kind of people up, who I would consider Satanists, in the way of defining them in terms of their values, it's not too hard to counter that. So people have jumped the aisle here, thinking that this way is so much better because they're a little bit more realistic. And of course, you're going to find these people in every walks of life. And of course, society does work that way because everything in society is corrupt. All society is 100% corrupt, and so what are you going to do? You're going to sit around waving the Bible saying that everybody's going to be good? We know that's not going to happen, and we know that the people waving that Bible are probably deviants themselves. So it's pretty sad, the amount of sexual misconduct that ministers have had. And we're not talking about with children. That's criminal misconduct, which the Catholics are known for, and I'm sure that goes on everywhere. There's a lot of reports from Mormonism, by the way, of sexual abuse going on. So the whole idea is that We're talking about people who are just having affairs and screwing everybody in their congregation and taking nude pictures and all the stuff that is considered terrible is something that these people get away with. So it's not too hard to come out and say, well, I'm not with them, I'm with these guys. They're honest. So that is the cause of the other side, not the fact that Satanism and Temple of Set and all the left-handed path are in any way empowered. They're not. I've never met an empowered left-hand path person. It's kind of the imbecile's path. The bottom line is that they have disgraced themselves. Who can take their proselytizing seriously? Their talk about being good and helping and doing that when they're such corrupt, evil people, and they support the corrupt, evil people. The doctors, the lawyers, the police, the military. This is what these Christians support. They're not supporting good people. They're supporting corrupt institutions, meaning that they are corrupt and worthless. So jumping the aisle isn't too big of a stretch, especially when you're promised sex and money and drugs. So it's not too difficult to get converts that way. So all of that needs to be fully understood and of what's going on. So what have they done, and what has the movement of Satanism started by the Church of Satan in the early 1960s with Anton LaVey, who totally crapped out within 20 years and ultimately died in poverty with nothing, and his family has nothing. What did he do? Well, he left this book, which is, I consider, the Machiavellian idea anyway. It's just kind of put in a new form called the Satanic Bible. But, it just really talked about the real world. That, enjoy sex, enjoy things. If people hurt you, hurt them back. I mean, people live by this code. Now, to label that and to have people jump onto that, and of course, it's easy to have a million-selling book when it was $2. So, and of course, it's one of the most stolen books as well. So, I doubt that I don't know who's making money from that, but the sales continue. But the point is that there was never much money made there from any of the books or his activities or anything else he did. You're a flash-in-the-pan star at that time. What happened after that was the Reagan Revolution, where everybody went crazy nut job right-wing Christian, that everything was evil. When basically they were just looking in the mirror. So the whole idea is that we need to understand that as a way of operating with all of that. But what have they achieved? What has any of the left-handed path groups that achieved anything? Well, there's a lot of them that are hiding, that are doing all their evil work. But the point is that there's really nothing that's been achieved. And there's no, left-handed path church. There's no Church of Satan. There's no Temple of Set where people go every week, where people give money all the time. As I said, there wouldn't be a Temple of Set today if it wasn't for Mr. Rich Bucket Pants, where mommy left him $10 million and he had a giant government check. So when we add it all up and we look at the work from this guy, which tends to be very non-practical information, a bunch of made-up nonsense that really hasn't been tested enough because there wasn't enough adherence to the Temple of Set to know if this stuff worked. He proved no personal power by doing anything right up to the day he died a year ago. Where was his demonstrations? You're rich, you're a landowner, you're a Scotsman, yeah. Let's say you make whiskey from the sky. So the whole idea is that none of this was done. And none of his books hold anything of importance. And of course, he would, fall back on the cowardice way of thinking, which, I can't reveal anything because of secrecy laws. Well, a lot of military have, and there's certain things you can say and not, but he certainly didn't come up with a system. We got hundreds of military people teaching remote viewing, talking about remote viewing. They've been doing it for 30 years now. Where's his stuff? Well, he was never included in any of that, rightfully or wrongly so. We don't really know what was going behind in the background, because a lot of military people didn't want to deal with him because he was an occultist. I'm not sure if Satan had any problem with it, but what has the Temple of Set done? What have they left? What have his writings left? Well, I've read his writings, and they're very unimpressive. It comes out of a very shallow, imbecilic, pseudo-intellectual mind that likes to quote a bunch of other people and really not put down anything of value. That's what it comes up to. So generally, if we look at anything, but of course we look at all of society, has been a horrible failure. But if we look at the Church of Satan, which is continuing today under other leadership and has some semblance of decent literature and groups, they are still going. The Temple of Set is still going in its own little way. But none of these people have any great following whatsoever. I mean, the problem is what you've done is society has created Satanism as the way of life. Why do you need to join a club anymore? It's just considered the way you operate. So even the concept of it all was a giant failure to start with and was doomed to failure because all they were doing was what society has always been doing, living a decadent, evil, self-centered reality, not caring about anybody but yourself. Until next time.